but also a good chance to sort of think about, what could my role be with regard to this particular challenge around energy burden, and how might this look for me in my work, in my life, to be thinking about this and centering some of these ideas to say, what are some approaches and strategies, I could help advance in my work. And that really is the focus today, is really getting some ideas of like, okay, so what is this thing that we're talking about? How do we understand it? Getting some context for some of the different, both energy efficiency and solar things that people are doing to tackle this energy burden, which is not to say that that is the whole of the solution. But we're going to focus in on those. Then we're going to have a number of different speakers share some examples of things that they have been working on, just to start, popcorning into your own minds, like, how would that work for me? And then toward the end, we're going to have an opportunity for just some breakout conversations. We're just going to randomly break you out into groups, and have a couple of different prompts for you to be thinking about. So what do I take away from this? How do I start to internalize this? So that is the sort of sense of where we are headed today. You can see the agenda up here. We are going to start with just an opening question, and I would encourage you all to pop some responses to this in the chat. How would you define energy burden? What do you think that term means? Go ahead and just share with everybody. What do you think that is? Look at that. People already popping in responses. Very good. Anybody else? These are all good. So you all are really, spot on. The energy burden is a percent that of your income that goes toward energy bills. Paying more than most everyone else for your energy, that would be in that higher energy burden category, right? We all probably have some kind of energy burden, but it's about that sort of relative sense, right? This is great. Energy bills putting stress on your personal financial situation. Right. Yeah. And that's really the focus of this conversation today, is trying to understand the implications of having that high energy bill. These are all great. Thank you so much. Oh, yeah. And Lily, I like how you started to already dig into sort of what are some of the things that are leading to the energy burden, right? And this is, some of those factors are super, super important. We're going to talk about a little bit. Yeah, this is excellent. Thank you so much. Oh, and Kristen, you got at both the electric and the gas side. So both the sort of electricity and the thermal. So that is definitely, it's a combination of those things. Good. Wonderful. Thanks, everybody. Okay, now we're going to do some other polls. We're just trying to warm you up, to start the day. So just a couple of quiz questions. Abby, do you want to go ahead and post those? All right, so the first one, what do you think is the average Minnesota energy burden? And so friends, what you're going to do is you're going to, click a response to that first question, and then you're going to scroll down in this poll chat, okay? So you got the first question there was, what do you think is the average? What do you think is considered a high energy burden? So getting to the point that people were making in the chat about like, oh, you're paying more than other folks, and you're paying such that it's creating a hardship, right? That this is now you're facing a trade-off for what else you can afford. Okay, so that's in number 2. Look at all of you responding. I love it, your pros. And then the last one here, about how many households in Minnesota do you think experience a high energy burden? Fantastic. This is also getting everybody just practicing different ways to engage in Zoom technology. Isn't it fun? Don't you just love Zoom? Brandy, I saw that smirk. I can see a handful of your faces, and so those are the faces that then I can see if you're laughing at me or with me. It's the fine line, right? All right. So it looks like we've got a lot of votes in here. You're getting there. We'll give people just another 20 seconds or so. So we're going to hit on some of this as we get into the presentation. But Abby, why don't we can close the polling. All right. So here are the results. What do you think is the average Minnesota energy burden? The average Minnesota energy burden is 2%. Nationally, it's about 3.5%. So obviously it does vary across the country. It's about 2% in Minnesota on average. The group knowledge here was spot on about what is considered a high energy burden. Yes, anything over 6%. These numbers kind of vary. There are a couple of different resources that we'll touch on as we get into this today. But there's a recent ACEEE study that used 6% as that a high, what was determined a high energy burden. And there's a Fisher, Sheehan, Colton is the group that puts together data on energy burden and releases new data every couple of years. And they also characterize it at about anything over 6%, 6% and higher. So well done. And then on this last one about how many households experience a high energy burden, again, the group was spot on. It's about 500,000, and that number varies. It was a little less than 500,000, 498,000, I think, in 2017. And in 2019, it is over 500,000. And perhaps not surprisingly, given our current pandemic and lots of folks having lost jobs, we're expecting that number to be higher for 2020. So, okay, thank you for engaging with the poll. Abby, let's go on to this next little bit, which I think is my presentation, which I was thinking that you were pulling up. Is that cool? Oh, look at you, you're so on it. Okay, so we were just gonna start by walking just through a bit of details to just help people sort of level set, have a little bit of context. For some of you, it seems like this topic may be well within your sphere of knowledge. Go ahead to the next slide, Abby, but we wanted to just make sure that we were all starting from the same page. So as a formal definition, and you can see that this is both the ACEEE and the Department of Energy lead tool definitions sort of all refer back to the same thing. It's the percentage of household income spent on energy bills. That is what an energy burden is. And a high energy burden is that greater than 6%. And then a severe energy burden is often characterized as something more than 10%. And so let me just, in context, right? So that means that more than 10% of your income you're spending on just the energy bills. So your electric and heating needs. Some people heat with electric. But that's not nothing, right? That's really substantial because that's not even thinking about the rent or food or like anything else. So that's just the energy part. And you can see on this map on the right hand side here that Minnesota's is about 2% on average. And then you can see how this varies across the country, right? And one of the things to just think about is in Minnesota, a big part of this energy burden for all of us is about our heating costs, but in other parts of the country, it would be related to cooling. So just keep that in mind, but you can sort of see where Maine is. Maine has a lot of delivered fuels, so not natural gas. And so delivered fuels can tend to be more expensive. And they also have a lot of fuel oil, which is sometimes even more expensive than propane. So something to consider. Abby, let's go to the next slide. And this is the piece that I was just starting to talk about. So what drives energy burden? And Lily, from your chat comments earlier, you were starting to get at this, right? So there are a lot of different things that can influence this. Certainly it's geography, as we just saw in that last map, but some of that is also true within Minnesota, and we'll look at a map here in just a minute. It can be related to fuel type. So propane, can be more expensive. It's not always more expensive, right? But so that can fluctuate. A number of years ago, we had a real propane supply shortage just because of access issues getting the propane to Minnesota. And that was a real burden for a whole lot of families. It also, not surprisingly, has a lot to do with income level. right? So if you understand what the denominator of that equation is, if the number on the bottom is smaller, that is naturally going to push that percentage up. And so that's a big part of it. The age of a housing stock has quite an influence. Even ownership structure, if you're a renter or you own your home, those can be quite different, not to mention just the dwelling type. Is it a single family home? Is it a duplex? Is it multifamily? All of those things are factors that can play a role in determining someone's energy burden. And Abby, if you'll go to the next slide. I think one thing to keep in mind is that there is high energy burden all across our state. So it's not that this exists in some counties and not others, or some communities and not others. The map here on the left is taken from that Department of Energy LEAD tool. And we have a link here. I would encourage people to check this out. It allows you to actually really zone in and focus in on sort of what is happening in my community. It gives you a sense for energy burden. But you can see, perhaps not surprisingly, in some of these northern states where it is also is colder, that we have, notably at that county level, a high energy burden. But if you go into the map on the right, which is a fact sheet, and I can send out a link to this and follow up to the meeting, what you'll see is actual household counts. And this is talking about the number of income eligible households. This is from 2019. So this is, 519,000 households in 2019 were eligible for the low income heating energy assistance program. And those numbers are really, quite substantial. So you can see, and I should have thought about how do I zoom for all of you. But I guess the thing that I'll note is that in Anoka County, as an example, that's 22,000 households. In Dakota, it's 27,000 households. In Hennepin, it's 113,000 households. So even in some of these areas where it's, slightly lighter color, sort of in Carver, Scott, and Dakota counties, there are still thousands and thousands of households that are eligible for low-income heating energy assistance and facing that higher energy burden. So this is something that is relevant to all of us. Abby, if you'll go to the next slide. And I just said, it's something that is relevant to all of us, and it is. And yet there are people who are differentially impacted by a high energy burden. And this is a quote from the ACEEE report. And they stated, we also find that nationally, regionally, and across all metro areas, low income, Black, Hispanic, Native American, and older adult households had disproportionately higher energy burdens than the average household. And there are, systemic issues that are also reflected in what we see in terms of household energy burden. Next slide, Abby. One example of this, I have a colleague, Dr. Gabe Chan at the Humphrey School, who shared some slides last week around energy equity, and I thought that this one was particularly illustrative. This is from a PhD candidate at UC Berkeley, who has been looking at in particular, sort of the racial gap in terms of energy expenditures, and has found that Black households' energy expenditures are significantly higher than white households. And this is controlling for income, household size, city of residence. And what they found was, and you can see this here, that Black homeowners spend $408 per year more for energy, and Black renters pay $273 per year more for energy. And this is looking across the state, using census data. And you can see those charts on the right that based on income, that gap is even greater over on the left-hand side. So for lower income households, that energy expenditure gap is even greater than it is, as you move to the right. So that this is a pernicious problem, and it overlaps and intersects with a lot of other things that we're all trying to tackle. Next slide, Abby. And I think, one of the, and now I'm going to make you nauseous with a dizzy chart. One of the things that I think is important to think about is not just, that sort of why does energy burden happen and what is it related to and what is the context and to whom, but also why does it matter, right? And so there's been actually a growing number of folks looking at the interplay of energy burden and health. And this is actually a screenshot from a study that was a comprehensive review of literature that had been looking at the interplay of energy poverty and health impacts and just poverty in general. And one of the really interesting things that they noted is that, in some instances, health is driving why people are in energy poverty, right? So if you think about people who have long-term disabilities and have lesser ability to necessarily, have a higher income, or they have sort of a fixed income, that may be a contributor to that energy burden. But having a high energy burden also contributes to poor health outcomes. And that's why this matters, because this matters actually in people's lives. And all of these factors are interconnected. I can actually, Kristen, I appreciate you putting things in the chat so well, and I can actually pop this one in the chat because it just might be interesting for people to get a look at. And particularly in this moment where lots of people are doing school from home and work from home and everything else from home, thinking about the energy burden and thinking about what that looks like for families, are they able to get warm, is a significant impact on health, as well as ability to learn and all of those other things. Next slide, Abby. So what can we do? Well, there are sort of the two big factors related to energy burden that are things that we can actually have an impact on. We can help connect people with jobs and opportunities that will raise their income, and we can also do a lot to help reduce folks' energy costs. The Minnesota Department of Commerce was a big part of a study a couple of years ago that a number of folks participated in a big stakeholder process called CLICKERS, or Connecting Low-Income Communities to Renewable Energy Efficiency and Renewable Sources. Oh, I was so close to getting it right. And this is some of the data that you see here. One of the things that we were looking at the time was this 2017 data, that there are 498,000 households eligible for energy assistance. Only 133,000 of those households actually sign up for and receive energy assistance. And there are a lot of factors that feed into why people do or do not sign up. But then of those, weatherization, this is like the whole house stuff, right? So going in and doing the blower door test and then addressing, with air sealing and insulation, and looking at the equipment like furnaces and all of those other things, doing a whole house improvement to make sure that you're tackling that energy burden by making systemic improvements, right? That then can provide a lasting benefit. So that's what weatherization really is. And of the households who had even gotten energy assistance, only 1,700 households received weatherization that year. And this fact sheet that I was having a screenshot from earlier with that map is was documenting the data and shows that it would take, at this rate, 291 years to weatherize all of the homes in Minnesota. And that is why we are here today, because that is too long. We cannot wait 291 years to help all of these households, and there are lots of other things that we can do. Next slide, Abby. So there are all sorts of folks who've been really looking at this challenge and trying to get a handle on sort of what are the things that we can all be doing at different levels, different systems. And that ACEEE report was really looking at what can governmental units and jurisdictions do in terms of helping understand what this challenge is and then actually doing something about it. And I reduced all of the great stuff that they said into these 4 bullet points. The first was, you can set some goals. So you can actually look at the lead tool that Kristen linked out earlier and some of those other things and say, okay, so what is our target? What do we want to say in terms of where we want to get? And then you can really hone in on where are the communities, where are the populations that we want to serve deeply and prioritize. And then you can look at how do we leverage the different resources that there are in our communities. That could be everything from utility incentives to public health dollars, all sorts of things. And then essentially, like as a really important component, engage with communities and the communities that you are trying to serve as you think about the design, delivery, and evaluation of those programs. And I can't stress that last point enough, and that's a lot of what the examples are that you're going to see. We, with CERTs, have put out this challenge of an under 5% energy burden this year, just really wanting to dig into sort of what if we had this audacious goal to reduce energy burden to under 5%, and what if we were trying to do it by 2025? What would that look like? Or what would it even look like to do it in 10 years, right? Like, so if we had a target, what would it look like for people to really come together toward that goal? And I think just this last slide, I think that there are a lot of folks that are already brainstorming. Okay, so what are those kinds of strategies? So there are things that we could do to help expand weatherization. That weatherization that we talked about can deliver 25 to 30% energy savings per year for a family, which makes a significant impact in terms of that amount that they're spending on energy. And that could be just through partnering and leveraging other dollars. But there could be a lot more work done to promote many of the existing utility programs that are already out there that are offering this kind of energy assistance. There are lots of examples of do-it-yourself energy conservation projects, and even projects where it's really like bringing neighbors and neighbors together. So one person who has some resources and skills who wants to help out their neighbors to help make an impact on those goals. Nick today is going to talk a little bit about a project looking at local housing redevelopment authorities and how they can advance energy efficiency in those units. We're going to hear from a number of folks that are saying, we're focusing with our community on tackling this and trying to help leverage resources to get them to the families that are most in need. Sandy's going to talk about an example from Rice County that I think is a model that many folks could be looking at. People are really thinking about how to partner with other organizations. I think that Brandy's going to talk about Leech Lake and both how they are driving work, but also how they've been able to leverage other organizations and partners into the work that they are doing to make a difference. And I think one of the things that we can really think about is also on the sort of what do governments control, what can they allow, what can they encourage, what can they, provide a carrot to? How do we help encourage new homes to build for energy efficiency? Are there some things that you might be able to leverage within your own sort of sphere of influence toward that? And then just to reinforce the whole income side, there's a lot that we can do to promote and expand clean energy jobs and training opportunities. And when you think about sort of procurement and procurement opportunities, there's certainly a pathway there to make sure that we're providing job pathways for others and thinking about training programs. Thank you. That was a really high level, fast overview. And I see that there are chats. So as Abby goes to the next thing, I will send out the PDF of that Department of Commerce fact sheet. The fact sheet that I was referencing in terms of those data sources isn't actually online anywhere. And I can't figure out why, but I actually have the PDF as a handout. So we'll send it out with the notes after this meeting. Okay. And Jessi, I turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Lissa. Hi, everyone. My name is Jessi. I think this is going to be also sort of a rapid fire presentation. So spending a little bit of time talking about a part of what Lissa was addressing. So how can solar play a role in reducing energy burden? What are some opportunities and strategies? Before I start, I want to give a shout out to Pei Fua, who at the time was a graduate student at the Humphrey School of Public Affairs in the public health program, and she helped compile a lot of the research that supported this presentation. Next slide. High-level agenda, we'll hit on some of the benefits of solar to low and moderate income households, as well as some of the barriers. There are a couple opportunities associated with programs and policies that already exist. Sprinkled throughout, though listed as number 4, there are some existing tools, data, and resources that are going to be hopefully useful for you and your specific communities. And then at the end, we'll have an exercise that Lissa maybe unintentionally gave a teaser to investigate energy burden in your community. Next. So the benefits. Obviously, the alleviation of energy burden is why we're here today talking about this. So the opportunity for solar to help lower the cost of electricity in a household. Okay. And then these myriad of additional benefits, right? So reducing electricity service disruption, stabilizing bills, job opportunities, that carbon-free power generation, mitigation of global climate change, as well as advancing energy equity and increasing the resilience of housing stock. Next slide. But obviously barriers do exist, or we'd see solar in every household, right? So there is that, the research shows the lack of support at the policy and programmatic scale. Tenure is a huge barrier for folks who identify as renters, as well as financial barriers like credit score checks or lack of incentives. There can be limited awareness or education, especially if programs or policies are moving forward without inclusive engagement, as well as insufficient trust or lack of consumer protection, which can be a huge issue, right? Because people have been burned in the past and maybe don't want to go down that route, as well as solar marketers and developers perceiving low moderate income households as low priority. So just not directing resources to focusing on creating that access opportunity. Next. So the two that I'll spend maybe through the tools that I talk about today, focusing on are sort of this lack of support at the policy programmatic scale. How can policy and programs maybe be shifted, so a little more innovative in the way that they think about inclusive access, or how can you design new types of programs, as well as some of the financial barriers, just calling attention to that. Next slide. The research shows that any policy or program that you're going to pursue the support solar access follows 6 principles for success: accessibility, affordability, that consumer protection piece, which is really huge, as well as consideration for long-term market development, make sure that it's integrated and compatible with any existing programs, and then really, like Lissa was talking about, really focusing on community partnerships. Next. So going to breeze through these, but what existing tools do you have in your toolkit? I'm sure folks are really familiar with the investment tax credit. This allows solar owners to deduct a proportion of the cost for installing a solar energy system from federal taxes. In 2020, that number is 26%. It's depreciating or declining to 12% in 2022, which is also the same year that it's set to expire for residential solar. However, this fails to address that there's oftentimes a lack of this tax appetite in many of the households that you would be trying to create or generate access to solar for. Next. Loans do exist. Solar companies typically do work through third-party financing organizations to provide those loans, which require the lender to be a homeowner, so tenure becomes an issue, as well as have good credit or minimum debt to income ratio. We recognize the slide that Lissa was showing where this is holistic system barriers. Obviously, folks are maybe going to run into trouble with some of that. And then solar leasing or power purchasing agreements, where the solar installer helps to reduce the initial cost of investment in the system, and then allows the homeowner to subscribe or utilize the energy system's output. However, the homeowner or whoever lives in the building where that system is operated will never achieve ownership of that system. So this isn't necessarily that long-term or sustainable solution. Next. And then finally, you have performance-based incentives or rebates. So there's 2 main types: the feed-in tariffs, which is where the energy is produced and payment is received for that energy, as well as the solar renewable energy certificates, where private ownership oversees the generation, and that's sold to utilities to meet renewable portfolio standard goals. Next. I did pull a case study for the state of Massachusetts, which I thought was, and we thought was, a really good example of a loan program that took time and effort to carve out assurance that there would be focus and emphasis on creating access for households with low and moderate income. So a 30% principal reduction of the total program loans of up to almost 11,000 with interest rate buy downs for qualified customers earning less than the 80% of state median income, and also help support lending to increasing the range of credit scores that would qualify to participate for regular solar financing. So thinking about reducing some of those financing barriers, as well as some of the upfront cost barriers. And as of March, they'd seen 56% of funds awarded specifically to households with low income, as well as 14% awarded to households with credit scores outside of the typical range associated with lending. Next. But all that said, you have those tools in your toolbox, yet time and time again, community solar sort of comes out on top. So I won't belabor what it is. I think most folks know, but two models, ownership-based and solar subscription. Obviously, ownership-based is where you would think of solar being a more fruitful tool for reducing energy burden. And then thinking about some of the co-benefits or additional barriers that community solar can help reduce associated with the long-term wealth accumulation. So that's both in the form of the ownership of the equity in the panels and the system itself, but also the opportunity to maybe redirect what otherwise would be spent on energy costs somewhere else. You do see some job creation and can see some job creation, as well as the advancement of community resilience. Next. This is not new to Minnesota. I think there'll be a couple folks talking much more in depth about this in a second, but I did want to just call out that as of October, we in Minnesota's Community Solar Garden program had hit a record 739 megawatts of operational capacity. And that's not including Minnesota Power or Cooperative, which are the suite of territories to which community solar can be an option. And then just reiterating that time and time again, studies have found that the benefits of community solar are not only to the owners or subscribers of the garden itself, but to all utility customers. So it's the win-win-win of solar. Next. And then I pulled an example not from Minnesota to keep things fresh, from Colorado, actually, called the Low Income Community Solar Demonstration Project. So the Colorado Energy Office invested in 8 demonstration projects across 19 counties for a total of about 22 megawatts in investor and utility territories, as well as non-regulated utilities. Something unique about this program was that they had subscribers participate. They called it sweat equity, maybe a red flag, but they had them participate in the installation of the panels and the site itself. So helping to provide some solar job training to community members during the installation of the projects, and then ended up with 380 households subscribing with reductions between 15 and 50% on annual utility bills, average annual savings of almost $400 per subscriber. As of 2017, I recognize the numbers are a little outdated, but there were almost 1,500 kilowatts subscribed, which was for those 380 households. And that meant that the average household was subscribing to between 3 and 5 kilowatts. And that was able to offset almost 100% of those subscribers' energy usage. So I think when we think or oftentimes grapple with kilowatts and megawatts, 3 kilowatts is not very much, right? So this is to go ahead and offset 100% of their energy usage is huge, with maybe less than people would typically expect. Next. I agree. No. I included some slides, like I said, that are tools and resources. I won't read these to you, but when the slides go out afterwards, feel free to click through these. So National Community Solar Partnership and then Solar in Your Community Challenge are 2 good ones. Next. Let's already define this for you. So energy burden is something that you can calculate using census data, or if you have individual household data, you could walk you could walk households through the calculation of this for their residents. But there are also other data sources that capture some of that information or additional information. So next. Here are 3. I, again, won't read them to you. You have EIA's Residential Energy Consumption Survey. The U.S. Department of Health has LIHEAP summaries for the state, as well as NREL, the National Renewable Energy Lab, which provides ResStock data, and a modeling platform that estimates residential energy efficiency potential. She says after she said she wouldn't read them to you. Next slide. 4 more, which I promise I really won't read. These will all be available after, but just diverting slightly from the solar piece and thinking more holistically about resources for energy burden and data resources. But the last one I'll point out, and Lissa used this in her presentation to show us a couple maps. We're now going to do an interactive exercise. So Abby, if you want to click next slide. Everyone, I think I saw people doing this earlier. So if you haven't already, you can go to this website. You can either Google Department of Energy lead tool, or I think Kristen posted the link in the chat. And what we want you to do is go and report your community's energy burden back into the chat. So I'll walk through how to do that on the tool, but obviously for the go-getters, feel free to just run with it. When you get to the website, there's going to be a pop-up that looks like what's on the PowerPoint presentation, and it's going to ask you to choose your income model. So it has area median income, federal poverty level, or state median income. Those metrics are calculated slightly differently. There's descriptions in the text box. I'm going to go ahead and choose area median income because that's what I'm interested in. Abby, next slide. And once you have chosen that, you are in the tool. You have the opportunity to go to the search bar, which is at the top left, and you can type in the geography of interest. So state, county, tract, and city is available. If you start typing in your city, comma, MN, it should auto-populate with the city you're looking for, and you can click on it. Next slide. Hopefully this is giving people enough time to click around. So I looked for Pipestone, Minnesota, and you can see that the tool reports out at the top. It'll generate a map of all of the communities in the state, but it'll report for the specific community you searched at the top left what the energy burden is. And then I know the text is small, but wanted to note some of the additional functionality of the tool. So if you have questions about some of the modeling methodology, that's available at left. They also include some case studies. And then you have the option when using this, which might make more sense in a second, to save what you're working on, which can be really helpful because if you keep looking down on the left, there's this bar of kind of filter options where you can compare different communities. You can start integrating filters directly associated with a lot of the impacting factors that Lissa was talking about, like building age, heating fuel type, the type of building, tenure. So when I say building type, I mean commercial or residential. And you can isolate specific income brackets that you're interested in looking at data for. So it really helps you disaggregate some of this data. So like Liz was talking about, when you say, okay, well, Minnesota's energy burden is 2%, that's largely untrue for many counties in the state. And similarly, if you start disaggregating by ownership versus renter, disaggregating by heating fuel type, you'll start to see that these numbers maybe aren't as rosy as looking at the state level would make them seem. Next slide. And I think last slide. And then finally, if you scroll all the way to the bottom below the map, which I assume many on the page have already done, you'll find sort of this dynamic chart view where you can toggle those same filters on and off, or change which metric is displayed as the y-axis or the x-axis, and start to visualize some of those different cross dimensions of the data, which is really useful. And I'm very visual, so helping to visualize that disaggregation is really useful. And they're ready-made. They already designed the graphics for you. So I think that's it for me. Hopefully you all feel shell-shocked with the amount of resources I just threw at you, despite not really going over a lot of them. But I'm gonna be waiting to see some of the results from your community in the chat. And other than that, thank you. And I think I'll hand it back to Abby.
And actually, you're handing it back to me. But Jessi, that was simply amazing. I am seeing people say like, "There's a lot of resources," and I got a chance to look at the chat from earlier too, and people are like, "What is the source for that?" So Jessi had lots of links in her slides, of course, to a whole bunch of resources, and I have some links on my slides, and then I actually have other links in the notes of my slides. We will get all of those out to you. I mean, there is a lot of information out here, but Jessi, I want to just say, the actually walking through how do you do the tool, I'm starting to see numbers come in, and I think that is actually just a really helpful way for people to dig in. And Brandy, that is a fascinating point. Yes, it doesn't actually allow you to do a nation in that same way. That's a point to follow up on, I think, as we move forward. But thank you all for digging into that. And Jessi, thank you so much for that review and really starting to help people learn how to fish, as they say. Okay, so Abby, let us go. Yes, that's fine. Go to the next one. So friends, we were going to have Christelle Porter join us this morning from Minnesota Renewable Now to talk about this work that she has been doing. Minnesota Renewable Energy Now is a nonprofit organization actually in Minneapolis that Christelle Porter started and is the executive director of, that's really focused on the North Minneapolis neighborhood that she lives in and has been an environmental activist in for years. And I'm going to put a piece in the chat here. It's an interview with Christelle that talks a little bit about some of the work that she's doing. She was going to come and share with us, and she's unable to be here, I'm sorry to say, about a project called the Soul Star Project, which is geared toward, as she describes it, building racial equity through renewable energy. And I would encourage everybody to take a look at this piece that I just shared. One of the things that I think is really great about this project is it is both thinking about the burden side, so having people have solar energy on their roofs to help lower that energy bill, but it is also very intentionally thinking about the jobs side and the workforce development side, and how do we recruit people in this case, from within that North Minneapolis neighborhood to be doing the solar work. They've hired a contractor from the neighborhood and are doing training, and on the job training with folks to move that project forward. So it is tackling both sides of that energy burden equation. And we're sorry that she was unable to join us this morning. However, we have a fantastic group of folks that are here to join us and talk about some of these other projects. And first up, we have Shannon Mortenson from Warren, Minnesota. And many of you may have seen Shannon present at other meetings in the past because Warren is indeed, as the slide says, a small town taking big steps. But Shannon's going to talk to us a little bit about the work that she and the city of Warren have been leading, in part sort of building off of this work that they've done with the Climate Smart Communities program. They have a partnership with Arnsberg, Germany as part of that, and had sort of an epiphany a few years ago thinking about drones and how to use drones to help identify households that have energy loss and sort of escaping out the windows, doors, cracks, and all of that. But I've now been thinking about ways to actually help finance and get dollars to help those families move forward with projects. So Shannon, I will mute myself and turn it over to you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? All right. Okay. Good morning. And inclusive financing, I'm hoping, is not going to be overwhelming, but I think it'll be a really nice tool in terms of what we've already started talking about today. A little bit about Warren. Next slide, Abby. We're in the northwest corner of the state. Population is just about 1,600. County seat, predominantly agriculture, everything you'd expect from the Red River Valley. We are 30 miles from the 3 regional centers of Grand Forks, Crookston, and Thief River. Next slide. So, and we do have a growing population, and people like to live here because of golf courses, the fair. We have 3 parks, large campground with 80 spots, municipal swimming pool. There's just lots of fun here. Next slide. One thing though that does differentiate Warren as a small community from other ones is we have all city-owned utilities. So we own and operate the electric, gas, water, sewer, and sanitation, which I do know gives us a little bit more leeway in doing some of these projects, but it also gives you some framework that you can adapt it to your community. Next slide. As Alyssa said, we have been working on thermal imaging. We have a pilot project going with Northland Community College and their aeronautics, and they have been doing thermal imaging in our community of all the structures using drones. We're 3 years into the process, and they're just starting to extrapolate all the data. But a conversation has been with city leaders, like, this data is great, but how do we get people to use it, and how do we actually get them to do a project? And there's a large amount of our population that lives paycheck by paycheck, double income. They're doing well. They have house payments, everything else, but you can't do those little projects that have a great impact. Next slide. Some of the thermal imaging, I'm just going to show you quick. If there are white spots on the thermal imaging, that is where the greatest energy loss is occurring. If you look at the courthouse one, and it's really white where that arrow is, there is a bank of windows that goes up 2 stories. And actually the courthouse has looked into replacing those windows because of the thermal scans. So we do see there is value to the scans. Next slide. So as we were having these conversations, like how do you assist residents? We started looking at why would you do inclusive financing and what is inclusive financing? So it's a utility funded program to assist in completing the energy efficiency projects. And you take the anticipated savings of the project to pay for the loan. It's nice because there's no collateral, no down payment, no credit check. So there's no barriers to the access of those funds. The loan stays with the meter or the resident, so it's not the person that's in that home. It stays with the meter. So we do have housing stock that turns over, but that savings would stay with the meter. And at the end of the day, it will improve the housing stock in the city. Next slide. So how inclusive financing works is the utility determines what project do they want to help finance. And the utility can pay, we're going to use the example of roof insulation, and the utility will pay $1,500 towards that project. And then the utility also determines that that homeowner is going to save $75 a month in heating and cooling after they complete their project, that roof insulation. So then if the customer's average utility bill is $300 a month prior to the project, with inclusive financing, the bill will stay at $300 a month, but $75 of that bill will go towards the loan payment because that's their anticipated savings per month, which gives it about a 24-month payback period. So after those 2 years, when it's paid back, the utility bill is then reduced to the $225 for the resident. So they'll reap the benefit of that $75 a month savings for many years going forward, or a new owner in that. And if for some reason the ownership changes within those 2 years, the bill still stays at that $300 for the utility to recoup the costs. So some of the benefits of inclusive financing is it shaves the peak usage for the utility on the electric side. It's really what we have here in Warren is our residences use the most energy during a red zone, and you don't have any way to shave that peak. So these types of projects will help you shave that peak so your utility bills are less as a utility. And then of course you have the energy savings for the resident. And the biggest thing is it provides a funding source for any income level, because you do have some people can access low income programs. Some people just have enough to do the project, but this has no barriers at all. And then it improves the housing stock for the community. So our plans to implement the inclusive financing are, next slide. We want to incorporate those thermal scans. So first off, we're going to use the thermal scans to determine where the most energy loss is occurring throughout the city. It might be rooftop, it might be windows, but we're going to see where we could have the greatest impact. Then we're just going to set the loan amount at a flat fee. We're going to try to keep it pretty simple and develop a payback schedule kind of based on average savings. So going back to the roof insulation example. So if we assist with roof insulation, $2,000 would be the maximum that the city would loan to that residence. And then we draft the loan agreement and state the loan stays with the meter, advertise for the program, have people come in, look at their thermal scans. They would have to produce receipts that the work has been completed to participate. So it would be a reimbursement type of project. And then the next following month, we just engage in that agreement to begin the payback on their utility bills. So it should be pretty simple and streamlined. Another thing that you can do, like we're planning on just borrowing the money from the utility fund. But sometimes local financial institutions may be willing to be a player in this, and they would loan the money to the resident with the city making the payment from the utility bills. That could get a little bit trickier because you would have to determine how that loan stays with the meter. And when you pull in the bank, then of course they might want credit checks and everything else. So if you want to make it available for every resident with no barriers, if you could, of course, it'd be best if you could find a pot of money, set up a revolving loan fund through your utilities. But that's an option too, hopefully down the road. So what we look at it as, the program will not only provide that energy savings for the resident at no upfront costs and without any barriers of debt, but it improves the housing stock. We are a growing community with a fair amount of elderly that live in their homes. So when these homes are purchased by younger families, they often need energy updates. And this will give them the opportunity to do that. We have identified that 63% of our population makes between 50 and 100,000 a year. And our housing stock is between 50 to 150,000 a year estimated market value. So that's kind of that sweet spot of like, how can we help people get these projects going? So then the program, in our estimation, not only provides energy savings, but will improve our community as a whole. Next slide. Just a fun little fact here. Fun facts. Warren, like I said, is a small town. There's just 13 of us on staff. So we don't have a sustainability coordinator. We don't have a budget for climate efforts. It's predominantly Republican. I think 98% voted for Trump in the last couple of weeks. But I do believe that if you do something so residents benefit, that everyone can adapt, and they will adapt if they have a benefit at the end of the day. It can be done.
Look at you giving hope to everybody, Shannon. I like it. It's really, I mean, it's incredible, the work that you've done. I'm sorry, do you have another slide? I didn't mean to, I thought.
No, this should
was
be
the
it.
last one. Okay. So Shannon, you've already been getting some good questions, and thank you all for posing questions. We're going to come back to that because we want to hear from our other presenters. But Shannon, this was just, it's such a great model, and the way that you're able to put it forward, and as you have described it, it's simple. And it seems like you have sort of some of the right tools at the ready to make it that way. But it really is just an impressive program. So we'll come back to a few of those questions. And next up, we will go to, thank you, Sandy. Sandy Malecha with the Northfield Healthy Communities Initiative. For those who are unfamiliar, this organization is dedicated to building partnerships and encouraging community collaborations that support, value, and empower youth. And they do this by bringing together programs and individuals and providing necessary support so that they can best put their expertise and resources toward efforts that positively impact youth. Sandy, I will just tell you that you have a lot of fans out there in the world for the work that you and your delightful collaborators, Natalie and Jennifer, are working on. It has just been a real treat to get to know all of you and to hear about the work that you're doing. I will turn it over to you. Go ahead. Thanks for being here.
Awesome. Thank you. And I apologize, you guys, my audio keeps cutting out, so I'm gonna leave the video off if that's okay. I apologize. But thanks, Lisa. That was a great setup, actually. So Growing Up Healthy is a program of the Northfield Healthy Community Initiative, and that's important because it affects the lens through which we view the community organizing work that we do through Growing Up Healthy. It is focused on supporting children and youth and making sure they have a healthy community in which to grow, and then also making sure they have the supports they need to contribute back to the community as adults. And that'll come up here in a minute. I just want to give a huge shout out. Beth Callistad is on, I think David Wamberg, even Tammy from Excel Energy. It's really great to be in amongst a lot of friends here. So just want to tell my partners here to weigh in if I'm getting anything wrong or missing anything. So like I said, Growing Up Healthy, it's a community organizing program, and it's been around since 2007 in Rice County, serving both the Northfield and the Faribault communities. In our work, we serve 5 low-income mobile home parks in Northfield and Faribault, where many Latinx families reside. Our staff, we benefit from having a staff now of 10 folks who are all from the community. All are bilingual in either Spanish and English or Spanish and Somali, or sorry, English and Somali. And that is a critical part of why we've been able to get a lot of work done. We're in Rice County. It's about 50 miles south of Minneapolis, St. Paul. We've got about 21,000 residents in each city. So just to give you some perspective on that. As far as the mobile home parks where we operate and do a lot of our work, just to provide a visual, it's approximately 540 actual mobile homes, households that we're working with. And you can switch to the next slide. This gives you a little bit more of a sense of our mission and vision. We do our work in the community, in the neighborhoods where people live. We've got some home visiting programs and caregiver organizing programs that ground our work in the community. Part of why we are able to sustain this work over time is that we're pulling resources from a lot of different grants, foundations, and also from our local governments and local donors. And so we're braiding all this funding and resource, and beyond helping folks with their energy needs in their mobile homes, we're really trying to serve families holistically. So a lot of our work, even since the pandemic, it's helping folks meet their basic needs. We've got our staff, Jen and Natalia, in addition to the winterization kit distribution and supporting folks with energy needs, they're out there delivering hotspots and iPads and helping families connect with educational apps that their kiddos need during distance learning. It's just kind of this holistic approach to keeping families connected. So just to give you a little bit more perspective, you can go ahead and go to the next slide there. On our homepage, the Growing Up Healthy website, if you go to that homepage and scroll, you'll see we have an interactive dashboard. What we're always trying to do in our work is listen to people, listen to what their needs are, and understand from their perspective where best to direct resources and opportunities. When it comes to housing specifically, and with folks living in the mobile home parks, what we've found is that it's really difficult to find contractors who are licensed and insured, who are willing to do work on these mobile homes, many of which are more than 40 years old. And you guys probably know well that finding a furnace that's affordable, those kinds of things, it's really tough. So a lot of what our staff end up doing is just helping families break down language barriers and financial barriers to accessing some of the energy assistance programs, but then also seeking out people in the community who are willing to do the work. And a lot of that has happened actually most recently through partnerships with the HRAs in each city and through partnerships with the faith community locally, finding contractors that are willing to come out and meet with families. And you can go to the next slide. So just a really high level overview, you guys, the strategies for all of what Growing Up Healthy does, it's all grounded in these ongoing trusting relationships. So we really do prioritize getting to know the neighborhood, getting to understand the residents and their needs, and then finding opportunities to elevate their voice. A recent example of this, Beth Callistad was instrumental in helping us in Northfield develop and implement this Growing Local Leaders program. It was a chance for diverse community members to come together and basically kind of learn how boards and commissions work. and they gain the confidence, right, and kind of learn the ropes of how to be at the table where decisions are made. Those are the kinds of things that we're really trying to capitalize on and do even more of. So it's not just listening to barriers and challenges folks are facing, but also then finding ways for them to tell their story, use their own data, right, to drive the kinds of decisions that keep them connected to the resources. The train the trainer piece is really important. We want always to, as you kind of think about, like, teach them to fish, right? So a lot of that has happened through career pathways kinds of programs. Under HCI's umbrella is another program, for example, called the Northfield Community College Collaborative. And through that, we're trying to connect young adults who are recent high school graduates with college level training to help them advance their career. And it can be anything from connecting with a welding program at the local community college to an early childhood licensure to whatever. So even as it relates to the mobile home repairs, we've always got an eye toward helping residents understand how to make the repairs themselves. And then building on that, helping young adults understand the benefits of becoming an HVAC person, becoming a plumber, right? And then trying to grow those kinds of careers from within the community. And then, like I said, combining funding to make sure we can keep this work going over time. You can switch to the next slide. With this, like I said, it's all about building relationships with the residents in the mobile home parks, with the park managers. That's been a really key piece. With our city folks, so Beth and David and Kim Klaas, all these wonderful people. With Excel Energy, so half the battle is connecting the dots, right? So if you've got the relationships with the residents and you've got the relationships with the city folks, and we can bring these people together and help make sure that the resources are getting where they need to be, it's just been incredible. One of these pictures here is of a slipstream expert who came and did some hands-on training for us. Another picture is of Faith Community helping with mobile food distribution. So in all cases, we're just trying to keep residents and the community connected. And that's how we're able to, again, get this work done really well. I just want to give a special shout out to City of Faribault folks. That's where our work with the Home Energy Squad visits really started. Someone reached out and said, hey, we want to make sure that our Latinx community members in the mobile home parks are getting connected to this opportunity. It mostly kind of landed on language barriers and folks having a level of comfort with folks coming into their home, right? The political climate makes that kind of a hard thing. So Growing Up Healthy staff worked with the city to try to bring that resource in, and the Excel Partners in Energy folks and the Home Energy Squad folks have just been incredible. And so we've been able to break down those language barriers. Most recently, we've got a Home Energy Squad expert who is bilingual in Spanish and English, who's been able to actually facilitate those Home Energy Squad visits kind of hands-on, which has just been awesome. And so it's through that work, right, being in the homes, we're able to see not just the energy needs families have, but also needs they might have related to food access or childcare, or you can imagine many other things. So again, just trying to serve families holistically. Again, a shout out to CERTs. Joel has been incredible. We've been able to connect with these winterization kits that we just got out into the community, and we're learning a lot. So I will say the Growing Up Healthy team, sometimes we're kind of shocked, like, how is it that we got into mobile home repair work? We're community organizers, right? And so what I love is that we don't have to be experts in how to fix a furnace. We can be experts in how to find the relationships and find the connections and kind of connect those dots. So that's how we're doing the work here. And next slide. Yep. And then, like I said, I just want to stress that HCI and Growing Up Healthy, we don't do anything alone. It's all about bringing in all the community partners locally and regionally that make this work possible and make it possible for us to sustain it over time. So just really grateful to everyone. And I think that's it. Thanks, you guys.
Sandy, thanks so much. We thought it might be fun if people could still see Natalia and Jen. I know that they are out in the community right now, so we're going to play this quick video. It's about 1.5 minutes, I think. Go ahead, Abby. Sorry.
Jennifer and Natalia work for Growing Up Healthy in Rice County, Minnesota. One of the services they provide is helping people with resources to winterize their manufactured home.
Energy burden is a real thing in manufactured homes. The amount of money that families make isn't enough to cover not only their energy bill, but as well as like food and other choices that they have to make. A lot of the work that we do is connecting community members to different resources, and the resources can be in the field of education, housing, in this case, energy. High energy bills in the winter, for example, has been one of the biggest barriers for families. We know that some of the mobile homes don't have the proper insulation, for example, and we know that that contributes, for instance, to having high energy bills.
To help with some of that energy burden, Growing Up Healthy does home energy squad visits, where they give families items such as energy-saving light bulbs, faucet aerators, and energy-saving shower heads. And now, a new partnership will help provide even more.
With CERTs, families are also going to get caulk to be able to fill in holes, plastic window sealer, and then the foam expansion. The reason I think that this is beneficial to a manufactured homeowner is because you can't always find somebody that is willing to work on a manufactured home, or if you do, it's really expensive. So to be able to empower these families, it gives them the resources to be able to do this themselves and help neighbors. In general, manufactured homes are known for using a lot of water, especially during the winter. Part of it is so that their water pipes don't freeze. And Rice County is not the exception for it. And we help reduce water usage in manufactured homes by providing the heat tape, and we have seen great improvement. What I like the most about doing this type of work is that we work with families. We are also from these neighborhoods, and for us it's really important to see our families thrive. I would say that my hope is for people to not have to choose whether or not they are going to purchase food or pay their rent or their energy bill. I hope that other communities also try to do a similar initiative. This seemed to work for us, I think, because we were listening to community members, we were working with other agencies such as CERTs, Excel Energy, the city. I think that a lot of positive can happen when we work in collaboration and when we hear the people from the community and what are some of their needs. I think we are all better off when we're all communicating with each other and working together.
Sandy, I think that you're seeing some praise in that chat for the work that all of you at Growing Up Healthy are doing. And we hope that you will share with Jen and Natalia our thanks. I will tell you that, as you said, we're not sure how we got into this work. I think how you got into the work is by listening as you put forward. And the partnerships that you're building are just amazing. I'm just in awe. And I'm a big crier, so I'll try not to cry for all of you as I do at the end of every video that I see. Thank you for sharing, and thanks for sharing that great work. Next up, we have Nick Larson. Nick is with the city of Winona. And Nick, I will tell you that when I was writing up your bio, I was like, I wonder if Nick even knows that his claim to fame within folks that I am connected with in Winona is that you have just a real can-do attitude and spirit. And that, you know, while you are based in that community development division and really coming at it from that perspective, that you have been able to channel sort of energy opportunities through the work that you're doing. And we're so excited to have you here today to talk about the projects that you've been working on. Go ahead, Nick. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity, and thanks for all the previous presenters. And I have to apologize. I got to follow that one right there where I think we have 2 slides, and I meant to put everything together since last week through yesterday and just been a little ill. So be a lot of verbiage. So with the city of Winona, it all started with the city of Winona becoming partners in energy, and that was headed up by John Howard, who I believe is also on the on this video call here, along with the Partners in Energy Action team and then Excel staff. And I believe there's a couple also on here, Tammy and Yvonne. So thank you for all that. The goal that I guess I was part of was reaching out to underserved or low income households. And the challenge at first was identifying these households and then how do you get into the homes? So what we were able to do is Partners in Energy Action team collaborated with Pam Newell, former employee and part of Excel and Partners Energy Action team, where her and I, we went through GIS and PAM software and identified households, and more specifically multi-family households that were individually metered versus master metered. The idea behind that was to have a direct positive impact to these low-income households rather than just the building owner in making his or her building more energy efficient, but having a direct financial impact for these other households. So that was kind of the first step there. Along with identifying these is just having community-based knowledge, along with reaching out to Minnesota Housing and what type of LIHTC or low-income housing tax credit projects have been in the Winona or Excel area, because those income levels then will line up with the rules, if you will, of the 1 to 4 family homes and the 5+ homes from the Excel programs, along with as a better grasp of getting into weatherization, energy assistance, and really trying to leverage all these programs that are available. And one thing that we would do here at the city is we did a lot of marketing, a lot of testimonials, a lot of press releases, just getting the word out to the community, social media, print, a lot of tabling events through farmers market, for us, the Frozen Rivers Festival that we have down here, and other sources, even reaching out to the teachers union. So during MEA, maybe they wanted an energy audit and really trying to press all the tools that were around. And again, that was a collaborative effort through, everybody that was involved with being a Partners in Energy. Some of the other things that we did, and I'll get to the HRA and that success there, but before we get to the success, there's always challenges. So we reached out directly to the property managers of these low-income housing tax credit project buildings here in town and the area. Direct letters, flyers, what are the benefits, reaching out. Really didn't grab a lot of traction, hit a brick wall, along with reaching out to our local Habitat chapter to try to team up with their Brush with Kindness program. And we did have some success there where some of those households using the Habitat program did get these low-income energy audits done for free, which is great. Before we started this, I had one at my house to find out what it's all about. Kind of hard to sell a project if you never really lived through it. So for my $75, I ended up having over $250 worth of things installed in my home. And I got to stand out in the backyard and have an adult beverage and play with my dog while this happened. It's a pretty nice experience. Other things that we did is reach out to ORC and the DAC, which those are two organizations here in town that cater to and serve individuals with disabilities. One of the reasons for that target is because we're making the assumption that those households would fall into the income thresholds and then be eligible for energy assistance, weatherization, Excel's home energy savings program, and all those. Again, try to leverage all those programs that are available. The other thing that we're able to do is we did meet with our local housing association, which they have a lot of landlords that cater to the college student market. So we tried to reach out to that, and that was a heavy lift. We didn't have a lot of success, which brings us to our conversation here with the HRA. So after identifying that all the HRA operated buildings here in town are individually metered, Pam, John, and I, we met with their executive director to explain the benefits of having these low-income energy audits to these households. And so kind of the process that we worked with is we had our one-on-one meeting. We explained everything. They seemed to be on board. Then we worked with the Home Energy Act or Home Energy team. And from there, we started scheduling up, hey, on your schedule, when can you come to Winona and do 197 energy audits? And then from there, we started sending out letters and communicating with the tenants of the HRA operated properties. And the HRA, they were very great to work with. They were pretty assertive with their tenants of, hey, we operate the facilities. We want you to have an energy audit. Here's the benefits. We're going to save money through the water saving aerators that are put in the shower heads, programmable thermostats, which many of these units did not have programmable thermostats, hot water heater blankets. I mean, all the things that we see on the brochure. I was fortunate enough that a family member of mine lives in an HRA operated unit, and she just had nothing but praise about how it went, the great communication from the Home Energy Action Team along with our local HRA of, hey, you are scheduled on this date. They're going to be here at this time. It's going to take 2 hours, and this is what we're going to do. And they're very respectful about her space, personal belongings. It went really well for that. So, I mean, that is the first part, again, the buy-in from the HRA. Overall, for our planning, it started in August, and all the energy audits at the HRA operated facilities were completed in November of that year. So, I mean, it did take handful of months to get everything off the ground, get it organized. The end results, we feel, as a city and the HRA, it was quite successful. Since that time, the HRA, what I've noticed on some of their buildings, that they've been taking their own initiative and maybe even utilizing additional Excel energy programs of insulating the exterior walls of their facilities, putting up new siding, seeing Tyvek get put up, styrofoam on the outside. So hopefully that's a continuation. If not, they're doing their own stuff, which is pretty awesome. Overall, for the city of Winona, through promoting one of the 4 household energy audits plus 5 energy audits as a goal, we increased the energy squad visits by 1,500% relative to what they used to be prior to 2007. So that's a pretty good thing for us. The other thing that we're able to do, and what we try to do, especially through the community development department, how we operate rehab programs through DEED, Minnesota Housing, Federal Home Loan Bank, is that a lot of these households that we are serving with these rehab programs are also eligible for the low-income housing or the low-income energy squad. So I provide them with the information about it, walking through the process, what it is, have them get signed up, and then even get a copy of their energy report. So when we're putting together the job scope to do their home rehab, I already know what needs to be done. Do they need exterior insulation? Do they need attic insulation? And then on top of that, trying to leverage weatherization funds and home energy savings program funds, where if they do need attic insulation and they don't have vermiculite and they meet all the rules, that program pays for those insulation services, then we're able to use the rest of their rehab loan to do more improvements to the house. We really try to leverage all of these programs together. And one of the things that we've done on a local level is through all these different programs that are available through SEMCAC, which is our regional CAP agency, through the Excel programs, through Habitat for Humanity, and any other type of rehab programs or financial assistance, such as energy assistance. I put together a list of all these programs and what the income thresholds are. So while I'm doing the income verification for our rehab programs, I already have a good idea if somebody's going to be eligible for these other programs, and then push them in that direction. We don't make it a requirement that they have to sign up for energy assistance. We just explain the benefits of those programs. Overall, like I said, I meant to get more stuff together. That, in a nutshell, is what it is. And the biggest thing comes to the buy-in from the HRA or whatever nonprofit that you may want to approach about these programs. We worked with another nonprofit here in town, Home and Community Options, and they serve those with disabilities. And they also have their own properties that HCO staff is there with 4 to 5 individuals with disabilities. They would definitely qualify on the income eligibility scale. And they also have a LIHTC property here in town where they can only rent per HUD's guidelines. They just didn't want to do it. They thought it was going to be too much work for their clients and maybe for their organization. So, I mean, there's ups and downs, and we're just fortunate enough here in Winona that the executive director with our HRA was on board with moving forward with low-income energy audits. And other than that, that slide. When it all comes down to it, what we're looking for is people's earned income. How can we help them save money through energy efficiency and utilizing the programs that are available in our area? And overall, we just tried to leverage all those separate programs that have the most positive impact financially, if you will. That was one aspect for these households. And for that, I believe that would be the information that I have for the group.
Nick, thank you so much. And thank you for being sort of a real trooper with not feeling perfectly and still doing a great presentation. Actually, I think that what you just described and the way that you were able to stack everything is just so, it's so impressive. And even as you were describing, like, I have the list and I'm doing the review of this and I'm doing, I mean, it's a really great model and great example. Thank you so much for sharing. We really appreciate it. Next up, we have Brandy. Sorry, Brandy, I was trying to finish entering something in the chat. Here we go. So we have Brandy Toft with the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe. Many of you have probably heard Brandy talk about some of the really great work that Leech Lake has been doing for years. Brandy's been with the tribe since I think 2001 and has been the environmental deputy director since 2016. Leech Lake has done an incredible array of projects using the Guaranteed Energy Savings Program for a number of their own facilities, but also doing, solar thermal hot air systems for households, and is here today to talk about a project that they've been working on, often dubbed Community Solar for Community Action, where they have a 200 kilowatt solar array distributed that is actually going to benefit LIHEAP households. Brandy, we are delighted to have you here, as we always are, and thank you for your willingness to do it again. I will turn it over to you. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Oh, I'm sharing my screen, so I'm taking it that you guys can see my screen.
We sure can.
Okay, because I try to be difficult, and that's just the way we go. All right, so many of you, I'm with the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe, and many of you probably don't know where we're at, but we're in north central Minnesota. We're made up of 4 different counties, or we encompass 4 different counties, I should say, and we're about the size of Rhode Island. So you can imagine that we have a lot of acreage and a lot of people living very remotely, very rural, very poverty level. And I think that shows with our 5 to 9% little, what Jessi had us do earlier, it shows that. I just wanted to show this screen so you kind of see where we're at. And I think you can see my cursor, and Cass Lake is right here. This is kind of like the headquarters of Leech Lake, or excuse me, that's Cass River. Cass Lake's over here, my apologies. And that's just kind of where we're basing some things out of, but we serve the whole reservation with our projects. And I just want to say that we are a tribal GreenStep nation. We're not a city, we're a nation. And this is at the entrance to one of the sides of the reservation, as well as this. And I'm sorry, Abby, I had to put this back in because I've been working on this sign for 5 years and they're finally just went up. So I am putting that on there. So these are now there. And I want to say to folks, when you can, please go to that YouTube website and you'll see a 7-minute video on our projects. So I am going to go over time. I know that, but I just have too much to share. So we all know about this. I'm not going to belabor this, but many people, we got as much as Houston, Texas for solar energy and solar peaks on ours. So, but how do we make it affordable? How do we make it not so technical that people aren't afraid of it or think it's just foo-foo? So, okay. So we started off with solar heat. And these are just solar furnaces that go on the house, just like you see here. They're scaled to the size of the home, and they're very affordable. I mean, they're less than a pack of cigarettes a month to run, so that's how I put it. And you got to put things in perspective for people. So about under $2. If you smoke, I'm saving you money. We just increased from 19 to 21 solar furnaces on the reservation. And I want to show you all the different ways here that we've went. We've went federal funds, we've went internal funds, we've went MPCA funds, we've done Department of Commerce funds. We will try to take your money any way possible to put these up. So keep it coming. But they're really effective and they're no cost really in maintenance. And if you haven't seen these before, they're 67.8% effective. Like that's how effective they are in their return. And they last so long. And we have taken and accidentally hit these things with hammers and they haven't broken yet. So note to self, don't hit it with a hammer, but it can withstand it. They work really good. Heat goes out the top, cold air comes in on the return, it just circulates in there, spits back out, continues on. The only thing I want to stress is in January, when we have no sun for 2 weeks, these aren't going to work. Neither will they work at night. I had someone call me and says, my furnace is not working at night. And I had to remind them it doesn't work on moonshine. So benefits of solar heat, the biggest thing I want to talk about here is, yes, it's fostering that self-reliance. It's everything, clean energy. It's using that first energy, right? It's energy that's always been here. And you go back to the Native Americans, the way they used to orientate their buildings, their different lodges and such like that, that they would orientate them to capture the sun by the passive energy. This is the same thing. We got to be smarter in building our structures. You know, use that passive technology when we can. But we really want to lessen that dependency on programs like LIHEAP. And we want that social justice and environmental justice addressed. And this way we can do it the same way. So here's just a GIS map that I had our GIS specialist do, and just looking at the different places. So kind of like Warren's drone footage, we do GIS footage, and they can do all these fun things with GIS and go on there and say, hey, this has a good solar aspect. This one doesn't. You can see all the reds, they're just orientated the wrong way. But then we can go ground truth and you see the ones with the circles with the X's in them. And that's because there's a tree too close or something like that. We're not going to cut down a tree to put in a solar panel. But you can also see right here in option A is where we were going to put our big solar garden. Didn't work out. These are just some more examples of different ways they can look, these solar furnaces can look on homes. And I did want to put this one in there is because if you build it with the construction of the building, the cost goes so much down. If you pre-plan, this building here saves $1,100 a year in energy costs because of these solar furnaces. And that's 34 million BTUs, just so if you wanted to know. So passives to PV. How do we make that transition, right? So we worked really close with Jason and BJ of Real, and we've known them for years. We've done projects with them, and we said at a meeting years and years ago, we are going to do a solar garden, and we did. And so this is this one. We wanted to build the whole 200 kilowatts in one place to make a garden, right? But we couldn't. We were stymied by all these rules and regulations and people that didn't want to see this go through. So there's always more than one way to skin a cat, whatever phrase you want to use there. There's more than one way, and to be persistent, like I think 99% of you on this call are, we're persistent. We find ways to get it done. So net metering, thank you. We went 540s. Thanks, we get more money. So we get about $22,000 on average per year out of these 5 units. We can serve up to 100 more underserved or additional families. The LIHEAP funding we get for the reservation does not serve the whole reservation. There are people who are still wanting or think they can make it at the beginning of the year, but get into the middle of the year and it's a nasty January, they can't make it. So that's where that funding comes in and helps them. And I really want to point out this Real was a really driving force behind this. This was not our brainchild, but we jumped on board immediately, and it had tons of funders. I mean, I think the funders on this project were about 13, 14 agencies and nonprofits long. If you're ever interested in that, I can share that with you. But what this also did was, not only was this such a beautiful project to help those that are underserved, and you got to think of these folks as well as you guys know, these folks are not folks that don't care about the environment, don't care, they care, they recycle, they do things, they do what they can, they just can't afford solar. So this is a way they can feel like they are contributing and being a part of the solar revolution. But what also this did for the government of Leech Lake is make them comfortable and let them see what this can be done, and led the way for another 60 kilowatts of solar to come into the reservation. So this is kind of how this works. And we can see the schematic here, but essentially what happens is each solar array is at a community center or some type of meter owned by the tribe. They get all the credits throughout the year, but at the end of the year, all the kilowatts, I shouldn't say credits, all the kilowatts generated from that 200 kilowatts at each location is then added up, and that checks are cut from that facility to the energy assistance program. So it's not perfect and it's not smooth, but in the end of the day, we get all the kilowatts generated. It's like pass-through funding in a way. And so I'll just go through real quick. This is one in the middle of a field that we have to go and cut sumac down all the time in front of it to keep it from being shaded. This is at the tribal college, great place to have it at an educational facility. This is at the old Palace Casino grounds, which is now the detox center. So it's a great place to have that. This is at Prescott Communities, and this one is at Real Headquarters. What the biggest thing about this one is that during this, we had Leech Lake College students engage in the building of every one of these. And in fact, it was workforce training. And in fact, one of them, the second one in right here, Anthony, actually began his solar career from this project. He is now working in solar all over Minnesota and in the Midwest. So very successful tribal member out there doing solar work. And I saw someone else put up their awards. So of course we had to put up our awards. This project was just great. It got a lot of brainchild thinking to implementation, a great opportunity for us. So we already put in with the guest project, as Lissa said, we put an additional 60 kilowatts. Now I just put in a grant for an additional 534 kilowatts. And this is just one rendition of what we can do on the new casino. We won't use all this roof space, but it shows where we have usable roof space to use it. And we are strongly engaged with using the Ottertail POP program. We submitted that in September. We won't hear till probably January, February, if we got that award or not. But 10 arrays on 9 structures in the reservation. I love chickens, grew up with chickens, and I love this cartoon. So if you don't laugh, there's no hope. But it's not only just about putting in solar and doing that. You gotta have some guidances, policies and backing for that, right? So we have all these different things. We have a build solar ready policy that is in process, an approaching net zero policy. And I just received last week the EV infrastructure and installation policy. And I know Ted's on the call here. I'll give him a shout out. Pale Blue Dot has been working with us on that and given us some great, fantastic information on those. Also, we have a 350-page solar master plan that looks at all 75 buildings on the reservation for their solar availability and took the top 30 and did in-depth analysis on those. We've also made a little sustainability portfolio that now needs to be updated. That's fantastic. That kind of gives a one-page synopsis on each one of our sustainability projects. That's great for showing potential funders, for showing tribal leaders, for showing you folks of what we're really doing and what we're doing out here. And then we have some climate change work going on and some feasibility studies that we're doing. Just to put a note out there, Leech Lake has 5 different electric utilities. Try working with all of them. So we're looking for a strategic plan in doing that. And just, I don't have to preach this to this group. We're all big go-getters. Sounds just fantastic what you all are doing. But it doesn't always hurt to say this, and this is part of the reason why I always, when Lissa calls, I answer, because opportunity is always knock if I'm not out there promoting Leech Lake and the great projects that we're doing. And I want to put out there that tribes can do. So if there's a tribe in your area, we are great partners. We have abilities to do things and we have abilities to get funding, but we also have a great need and we really want to work with you. So even though it may not work out, I still want to meet you. I still want to network with you, and we'll need a little more FaceTime in COVID. So, all right, again, chickens, love them. So that's what my contact information is there. It's best to email me these time of days. So thanks.
Brandy, thank you so much. And I always like your chicken cartoons. I particularly like the fear of change one.
Yeah.
Okay, if you will stop sharing, we're gonna
Yes.
go back to gallery view for everybody. We have a couple of quick questions that I just want to throw out there. Brandy, quick one for you to start. There was a question about, I'm trying to find it. Would a solar furnace work on a manufactured home if it has forced air heat?
All we did. You can do, see the solar furnaces have their own system. They're like, they don't tie into anything. Mm-hmm. So you kind of have your own ducting system, and it's one tube into like the central point of the house. And then at the end of the hallway, and good ways away, you have the return. So it doesn't matter what kind of heating system is in the home, you can do a solar furnace.
Perfect.
And Eighth Fire Energy, or Eighth Fire Solar, excuse me, are the ones that are building these in Minnesota right now.
Mm-hmm. And I will ask you to put a link to that in the chat if you would, as well as your sustainability video, please. And thank you. And going back, Shannon, I'm going back to a question for you that came up earlier, which was in particular around, is the model that you are talking about similar to the proposed energy efficiency program in Minneapolis? And I wondered if you would just talk about how you were both part of that study just briefly.
Yep. Yes, it is. Very similar. I think it was about 18 months ago, the city of Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Warren all participated in a feasibility study to determine if inclusive financing could work in Minnesota. Warren was chosen because of the municipal ownership, and then Xcel Energy and Minnesota Power were also part of the feasibility study, and it was determined that this would be a model that would work in Minnesota.
And Shannon, do you have a link to that by chance? That study?
I don't.
We'll get it and send it out, because there were also some questions in here about how does it work with renters who might move before the item is paid back and maybe don't have the benefit of owning the asset that they're paying for on their bills? And I think the feasibility study talked about that, but maybe you could address it briefly.
Right. Yep. The feasibility study did talk about that. And that is one of the, and there was a lot of talk about it during the feasibility study too, a lot of discussion on, renters don't benefit. So it is something that I guess it's hard to address. The owner does benefit. You would hope that they would do the good thing and increase or decrease rental costs. But that is a difficult caveat to work with on the inclusive financing portion of it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So we're going to go to breakout groups. This was a lot. I'm going to acknowledge that. And I appreciate folks who've been engaging in the chat as we've gone. It's just fantastic. But we wanted to give you just a little bit of time to essentially digest what you have just been taking in, and I'm going to pop these questions into the chat. You're going to be grouped randomly. There are going to be about 6 of you in a group. And we'd like you to just think about these 3 questions. How can what you've heard today apply to your community? Any of these different examples, any of the resources that you've seen? What assets could you harness? I mean, we've heard about a lot of that from all of our presenters. And what networks could you tap? These are not facilitated breakout rooms. Abby's just going to push a button and push you all into them. I encourage those of you who feel that you are an extrovert to try to help step up and be the first person to talk, but then to not dominate the conversation after that. And Abby, if you are ready, I think that we are ready. Welcome back, everyone. I was mid-sentence saying something to my group because I apparently can't read the prompts. I hope that that was fruitful. We had a lovely discussion in our group about, you know, how this can be applied right then and there for folks looking at the next steps. We even had folks sharing examples of the things that they already have in motion. So well done, Bloomington. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. We will be sending out the PDF from Commerce that I referenced, as well as all of these presentations where you're going to be able to get into all of those links and be able to dig into that data. I'll just say yay for all of you that had nerdy questions about the data and references. I love that. Thank you so much to our speakers. You all have been doing such great work, and it is a real testament to the partnerships that you're building that you also gave a nod to all of the people who have been involved, and many of you are also on the phone. Thank you for all of the work that you are doing. Kristen, do you want to just briefly mention this upcoming GreenStep webinar?
Yeah, I'm a little sad because people were telling me in our breakout room that this is their favorite workshop ever, this one today. So I don't know how we're going to top this, but our next webinar is we'll be talking about construction, demolition, and building material reuse. And so what do you do when you have to tear something down? What are those options for reusing the material and thinking outside of the box? So that's on December 16th, 9 to 11 a.m. You can find that on Eventbrite. You search GreenStep Cities, and all of these should pop up, and the future ones are listed on there as well.
Thank you, Kristen. Thanks for all of the work that you do putting all of these together. Abby, I don't know if you might show your face, but you've been hiding in the background today, and I want to just give you huge props for all of the work that you did helping pull this together. Thank you so much. As we go into Thanksgiving, let me say to all of you, be well, be safe, and know that we are all thankful for all of the great work that you are doing. Thanks, everybody, for being here today. We'll send out more resources. Thanks.